Hello, it's Dr. Rhoda again, and welcome to another video. On the other day, we were talking about genitals, and I know it's something in our society we don't talk about much. And on Wednesday, we talked about the male genitals and some of the misconceptions that happen for people in believing what is typical size, what is typical shape, the variety, and the problems that can cause. And so I thought today we could talk about women's genitals, because there's just as much discomfort in talking about women's genitals as there are about men, and maybe in some ways even more, because I think how a lot of young girls get brought up, there's a great deal of shame and discomfort, even more for girls than there are for boys, about their genitals. Girls often get brought up in teaching that their genitals are dirty and don't touch yourself there. Good girls don't do that, and which causes a lot of problems for women as they grow up. And just like with men's genitals and the weird and funny names that we have for them, there are a lot of weird and funny names for women's genitals too. I'm sure all of you know as many of the weird, funny names as I do, and maybe you even know some more that I don't know, because new names come up all the time. I swear, a new generation comes along and they come up with new, funny, weird names for genitals. So it's a long list. And part of the problem with all of that is that for many people, there is this confusion about what the female genitalia really entails. For so often, people tend to focus on the vagina. And in reality, the vagina is just the internal part, the part that goes from the vaginal opening up to the cervix. So that internal kind of tube-like structure is the vagina, where women's genitals really encompass a great deal more. The vulva, which are the external structures, encompass the clitoris, the labia majora, the larger outside lips, the labia minora, the inner lips, the tissues around the urethra, the tissue around the outside of the vagina, the perineum, which is that part of skin that goes between the vaginal opening and the anus. And then even the tissue on the outside of the anus is still considered part of the vulva. And it's all packed with lots of fabulous, wonderful nerve endings. And unfortunately, people don't even realize the complexity of the vulva, because the vulva is, they don't understand how it's supposed to look, because there really isn't a way it's supposed to look. The interesting thing about the vulva is that it's often as unique as the individual person herself. It's almost like her unique set of fingerprints, because practically every vulva is slightly different, as far as the labia, the size of the labia, the coloring of the labia. The labia minora often is not just the smaller labia. Oftentimes it hangs out from between the labia majora. And there's a wide variation. And the interesting thing, the clitoris is actually mostly an internal organ. The little bit that you see on the exterior, it's kind of like the tip of the iceberg. And that tip can vary greatly. It can be pea size that is a bit hidden and what's called hooded by skin. So it may be often difficult to actually find the actual tip of the clitoris. You may be able to feel it more than you can see it, depending on how the skin is around it. For other women, it can be quite large. It can be almost looks like a small penis. So there's a wide variation. And like we were talking about with men, that because of the multiple images that we see in porn, there are certain looks that porn tends to like for their actors, male and female. So the penises that you see on male porn actors often have a certain look to them, a certain length, a certain girth. which is not typical. The same with the female vulvas that you see in porn. The way the clitoris looks, the way the labia looks is a certain look that porn thinks is attractive. And so for many women, their vulvas look nothing like the porn vulvas, which unfortunately, because of this comparison, because of this belief that, oh, I don't look like what the women in porn look like, so therefore there must be something wrong with me. Mine must be wrong. Or sometimes it's even the partner who'll be like, well, you don't look like the women I saw in porn. What's wrong with what's going on down there? And the problem with this is that it's really greatly increased in the last few years, the number of women who are going for cosmetic procedures called labiaplasties. And sometimes labiaplasties are done because the internal labia, the labia minora, can be so long that it can get in the way and it can get stuck in clothing. It can get stuck with different sexual positions, and it can be uncomfortable and painful. And so some women choose to have that shortened a little bit so that it's less painful, it's less likely to get caught, and it just makes their lives easier, which is really more where it started from. But it's now become this kind of almost this cosmetic industry where so many women are going in because they want to look like the women in porn, and they think that their labia are unattractive, disgusting, and they're not. It's just the natural variation that is supposed to be there. And it's sad to think that so many women are having surgical procedures for things that they really don't need. And let's face it, I am not the type of person who is going to condemn anyone for having cosmetic surgery. If it's really what's going to make you happy and you really like it, absolutely, by all means, it's your body, you get to decide. But when people are having it because they think that they're somehow abnormal, that this is going to make them happier, that having their labia sculpted into a way that is more aesthetically pleasing, and of course that's aesthetically pleasing according to who, that can be a problem. Like that's where you run into difficulties. So there really doesn't need to be nearly as many labiaplasties as are being done. So I just want people to think about it before they rush off to a plastic surgeon to have a labiaplasty done, as to, this is not going to make you feel better as a person. It's not going to make you feel sexier, better about yourself. So it's good to understand the motivation why you want this type of surgical procedure. I'm sure there's much more I could talk about, but I think that's a good start for now. So, let's remember that the female genitalia, let's not forget the vulva. With all the talk about vaginas, we tend to forget about the vulva. We tend to forget about all those wonderful structures, all those great nerve endings. And let's remember that all the vulvas look different because they're supposed to. That's the way Mother Nature made us. And let's enjoy the vast differences that we come with. So that's all for today, and I will see you next week. Have a fabulous weekend. Thanks for joining me. Bye.